Why study the parables? Good question. I'm glad you asked. I've been teaching a course on the parables for almost 20 years now for Fuller Theological Seminary. I think I've gotten in a rut. I ask myself this question each time I start to prepare to teach this course. Why? Let me give you some of the reasons why I think it's worth your valuable time to study the parables. And stick around to the end of the video and I'll give you a great resource for your own personal study of the parables. First, let me read to you from my ECD. That's Technical Teaching Terms for Expanded Course Description that I just submitted for an upcoming course on the parables. I write, this course provides an introduction to the study of the parables of Jesus with an emphasis on understanding them in their historical context and interpreting them for teaching and preaching. We will also explore such issues as the role of the function of parables in Jesus' proclamation of the kingdom of God, the history of interpreting the parables, and how parables, imagery, and metaphor work. Now, doesn't that just inspire you to set aside 10 weeks of your time, a good chunk of your precious savings, and time not spent biking? I mean, time not spent with your loved ones. Not for me, so let me give you the reasons why I study the parables. First, almost 1/3 of Jesus' teachings are in the form of parables. There are between 45 to 65 parables, depending on how you classify a parable. Yet, it was not until I was doing my PhD studies that I actually heard anyone teach on how to interpret the parables. So if you want to understand Jesus' view on heaven and earth, you need to get a handle on the parables. Second, how do Jesus' parables compare with parables in the Old Testament? Are there parables in the Old Testament? The closest is perhaps Nathan's rebuke of David in 2 Samuel chapter 12. The Lord sent Nathan to David, and when he came to him, he said, there were 2 men in a certain city, the one rich, the other poor. The rich man had many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb which he had bought. He brought it up, and it grew up with him and his children. It used to eat of his meager fare and drink from his cup and lie in his bosom. It was like a daughter to him. Now there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was loath to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the wayfarer who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared that for the guest who had come to him. Are there any others? Another great question. Third, did you know that the rabbis also taught in parables? Where would you find these parables? What were they like? How do they compare with Jesus' parables? Now you know the parable of Jesus teaching about the woman who lost one of her 10 coins, and she lit all the lamps in her house and searched for it until she found it, and then she rejoiced in Luke chapter 15. Well, just to whet your appetite, let me read you a parable attributed to Rabbi Phineas ben Yair, who lived around 150 to 200 AD. If a man loses a small coin in his house, he lights lamp after lamp, wick after wick, till he finds it. Now does it not stand to reason if for these things which are only ephemeral and of this world will light so many lamps and lights till he finds where they are hidden? For the words of the Torah, which are the life of both this world and the next, ought you not search for as for hidden treasures? So how do Jesus' parables compare and contrast with those of the rabbis? Fourth, what about Greco-Roman authors? I mean, aren't Aesop's fables basically parables? Well, this is a really good question. I'm glad you asked it. Up until 1900, the parables were interpreted as allegories. I'll get to that in a bit. Then this German dude, Adolf Ullica, comes along, and he claimed that they were not allegories, but they were extended similes. Now he based his ideas on ancient Greek rhetoricians' classification of stories. As such, the parables were sort of like Aesop's fables. They were moral stories that taught one central idea. Whether you agree or not, what Ullica did was launch a firestorm of research on the parables over the past 130 years. And now, time for an impromptu parable from a situation that arose in my life just this very moment. Jesus' parables are taken from the everyday experiences of the people that he spoke to. The kingdom of God is like a leak in the sprinkler system that a certain man found in his garden. And he dug down and he found, and in his frustration, he cut it out, sealed it up, and then buried it where no one could find it. Well, that's about as good as I can do right now.
A few moments later.
We're back. This brings me to my fifth point. There has been a ton of research on the parables over the past 130 years. Some of this has been very fruitful, some of it turned out to be a dead end. But two things to grasp here. One is that this has been a very exciting area of research in biblical studies. Two, the idea that the parables are allegories and should be interpreted allegorically has more or less been put to rest. But, and this is where the rub comes in, I would bet that almost every sermon or teaching that you have heard on the parables has been allegorical. Why? If this approach has been shown to be wrong, why is it still used and taught? Do you read and teach the parables allegorically? Don't answer that right now. We need to move on to our sixth point. Sixth, when we talk about Jesus' parables, we need to realize that they are all not the same type of parable. Some are metaphors, some are stories, and some, just to violate the previous point, are allegories. What's the difference between these different types of parables? How can you tell? And so what? And just to complicate the matter even a little bit more, each author uses the parables slightly differently. For example, Luke has 24 parables. 18 of them are unique only to him and his gospel. Matthew has 23 parables. Mark only has 8. So we can see that Matthew and Luke put a great deal of weight on Jesus' teachings in the parables. And does John even have one single parable? Seventh, I'm losing track of my numbers here. Seventh, it has been said that if a myth establishes a world, parables subvert that world. In other words, parables make you question accepted teachings and doctrine. Not only that, but as very simple short stories, they are almost ideal for doing this. Consider this parable from Matthew 13. Every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. It's incredibly short, easy to remember, pithy, but it forces us to think. What's old in my treasure and what's the new and innovative that I have to bring out in my ministry and teaching if I'm going to apply this parable to my life? I said at the beginning that I'd give you a free tip on where to start your study of the parables. Well, it's sort of a shameless plug on my part, but I have over 20 videos on the parables. But if you click on this link up here or in the description below this video, it'll take you to a playlist of all my videos on the parables on YouTube. I have over 20 of them, and I hope these are a valuable resource for your study of the parables. I'm going to close with the words of Donald Hagner, who I studied under in the last century. And the final judgment, an idea from the past, these parables retain their significance. Faced with the mystery of a kingdom that is both present and future, the parables, in short, address realities that continue to be of great importance for the church today. They confirm to us the reality of God's kingdom and motivate us in our discipleship. But they do so only if we have ears to hear. Peace.